Republicans are already talking about impeaching President Joe Biden.
Congressman, on what grounds would you impeach President Biden?
Well, if you look at where we are, Stuart, I mean, President Biden is failing on so many different fronts. But if you look at Israel, you showed those quotes and tweets, what he said when he was a candidate, and he sure was bold then, but he'd probably like to eat some of those words today, because what he's done to Israel, walking away from our strongest ally in the Middle East, is disgraceful. You've got Democrats even admitting that right now. Our main objective is to get Israel the support they need to show that we stand with our ally Israel, even if Joe Biden's walking away because he is now trying to appease the pro-Hamas wing of his party.
Is it a high crime and misdemeanor to walk away from a big ally?
Well, what we want to do is get President Biden to actually go and deliver that aid.
Yes, we must impeach President Biden for withholding some of the weapons, a very small amount of the weapons that are being used to kill thousands of Palestinian children. Because, we need those weapons. We need to show that we stand by our allies while they do an ethnic cleansing. Yes, of course. Look, the Biden administration has already supplied Israel with billions of dollars in bombs already, and so it's not like they're running out. I mean, they'll run out of Palestinian children before Israel will run out of bombs. And I hope that does not happen. But that's what they're trying to do. So now, where does this come from? Biden said in an interview with CNN on Wednesday that if Israel invades Rafa, that the U.S. will stop supplying it specifically with artillery shells, bombs for fighter jets, and other offensive weapons. Remember, offensive weapons, not weapons for defense. I think that's very important to point out. Now, there's over 1 million refugees that are confined in a very small area in Gaza right now. Over 100,000 have fled so far, but once again, there's no really else to go. If this invasion happens, which it looks like it's going to be mass civilian casualties. And so, look, already the Israeli army shutdown of the Rafa border crossing means that no humanitarian aid has been in that area for days. And so there's already famine going on, and it's just going to get worse. Yet members of Congress, that's Steve Scalise that you heard there, they're literally chomping at the bit to let Israel go in and finish the job. And they're willing to impeach or try to impeach President Biden for holding back just a tiny portion of the weapons. And I'm going to get into the details of those, right? But look, you had, again, in that interview, it was mentioned that it was Democrats. Democrats also agree with this. People like Representative Brad Schneider, who said in a statement on Thursday that he is deeply concerned about the decision, as well as the president's comments about withholding security assistance to Israel. Well, this is not about securing Israel. It's about ethnic cleansing. If you call that out correctly for what it is, Steve Scalise, John Fetterman, and Brad Schneider will all call you pro-Hamas. Well, I guess we're all pro-Hamas now at this point. If you're against blowing up children, then you're a pro-Hamas. Again, the reality here is the administration had paused some of the bombs, not all of the bombs, just some very specific weapons. One shipment had consisted of 1,800 2,000-pound bombs and 1,700 500-pound bombs, which were part of an earlier package approved to Israel and not the recent $95 billion aid package that the U.S. had already passed in April. That was Congress had passed in April. The U.S. decision was taken due to concerns about the end use of the 2,000-pound bombs and the impact that they could have in dense urban settings, as we've seen in other parts of Gaza, said a U.S. official speaking under the condition of anonymity. In fact, he said when asked about the 2,000-pound bomb sent to Israel, civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers. So you're bombing population centers, you're doing war crimes. So now what kind of damage do those 2,000-pound bombs do? According to the UN, the pressure from the explosion can rupture lungs, burst sinus cavities, and tear off limbs hundreds of meters away from the blast site. So if you're lucky enough, or I should say unlucky enough, to be hundreds of meters away, you can get your arm ripped off, your limbs ripped off. your lungs exploded. And if you're close, well, I guess you don't have to worry about any of those things. There won't be anything left of you. So, I mean, using those weapons, unconscionable in a place as densely packed as Gaza. And so, yeah, it would make sense, like, hold on, we really don't want you using those bombs in your operation in Rafa. And here's Israel saying, but we need them. We need those bombs. We need to destroy entire city blocks in one go. Now, the International Commission for the Red Cross in a 2022 report said that the use of wide area explosives in densely populated areas is very likely to have indiscriminate effects or violate the principle of proportionality, which is what Israel does and has been doing for quite some time. Yes, Hamas will lob some rockets and people will get injured and people will get killed, and that's terrible, right? And then what Israel will do is then launch massive invasions, bombing runs that disproportionately kill Palestinians, including innocent civilians. So not only are they getting terrorists and Hamas, but they're also getting a lot of innocent civilians, which they're not even keeping track of how many they kill. There's a recent interview Piers Morgan had with an Israeli official where he's like, well, we don't really know how many civilians we've killed. But I promise, we're being very, very careful not to kill civilians. Well, how do you know? Unless, you're keeping track of it. No, they either don't know how many civilians that they're killing because they don't care, or they know exactly how many civilians that they're killing and they don't want to admit it. And that's one of the problems. So anyway, we were all told that, hey, look, the bombings will stop, all this will stop if Hamas just gives back the hostages. Well, there's been so many offers by Hamas to give back the hostages in return for a permanent ceasefire deal that Israel has absolutely rejected. And now the IDF says, well, we have to use those 2,000-pound bombs on Rafa, to get the hostages back. Those bombs that obliterate blocks within hundreds of meters, killing and maiming people, but we're worried about, the hostages. Ridiculous. This is not about getting the hostages back. This is about wiping out Palestinians. The Israeli government keeps saying, well, we just want to destroy Hamas. We destroy Hamas. Well, who is Hamas? Yeah, some of them, they're going to tell you that it's all Palestinians. Well, there it is. Israel's National Security Minister Ben Gvir has repeatedly called for the full occupation of Gaza and to encourage the voluntary migration of its residents. How are they going to encourage that, I wonder? You know what that sounds like to me? Ethnic cleansing. And that is an ethnic cleansing that members of both of our political parties seem to be in favor of, seem to want to see happen. And yet, and by the way, the Republicans are saying, we're going to impeach Joe Biden for, temporarily holding back a tiny portion of these bombs that were being used, that are being used to kill innocent civilians alongside of Hamas. But then again, you've heard these same Israeli officials come out and say there are no innocent civilians in Hamas or in Gaza. They're all Hamas, even though that you have half of the population that is literally children, okay, women and children. Those are people. They're all Hamas, and so they must be destroyed. And look, these bombs not only will kill innocent civilians alongside of Hamas, but also likely the hostages. Once again, I thought your whole goal was to get the hostages back. It's not. Now you have Representative Corey Mills that is drafting these articles of impeachment already. Senator Tom Cotton has said the House has no choice but to impeach Joe Biden for this. Again, it's ridiculous, right? This impeachment stunt will do nothing. Secondly, Biden has been pro-Israel. In fact, some of the latest breaking reports says they'll allow for these weapon transfers to go through anyway. And so even this ask of, hey, don't use those gigantic bombs to indiscriminately kill people that are packed into a very small area, is not enough for the bloodthirsty right wing. And so here we are, Biden relenting and saying, go ahead, go and use these bombs. We're not going to hold you accountable at all. There it is. And still, the right wing's like, we're going to jump on this impeachment bandwagon once again. Now, social media weighed in on this. One person says, apparently House GOP members have thrown out the required benchmark of high crimes and misdemeanors when it comes to impeachment. JD Sharp says, this is objectively stupid. Standy says it's desperate, laughable. And Art Martin says, we're going to impeach the commander-in-chief for making decisions that are 100% authorized by the Constitution. So now the right wing says, well, we have to do this. It's the same thing Donald Trump was impeached for. You remember, he was withholding arms shipments to Ukraine. Do you know why? President Trump, at the time, President Trump was holding up those arms shipments in Ukraine. He was doing it for political favors. He wanted the president of Ukraine to do an investigation of his political rival. So that's what he wanted. Whereas Biden had, threatened to withhold this arms shipment in order to try to prevent a slaughter in Rafa, to have these particular bombs, these weapons used against mainly civilians and refugees in a war where 34,000 civilians have already been killed by the side that we are supplying with those weapons. Definitely not the same. Different conflict, different motivation. But once again, you have these same vile right-wingers who were okay, by the way, with holding up that shipment to Ukraine. Some of them were, at least. and are now defending Donald Trump for it. Once again, the right wing's bloodthirst continues to show through, as well as their thirst for doing ridiculous impeachment.